Welcome to On the Verge. I'm your host, Joshua Topolsky, and you're a rhesus monkey named Mallory. We've got a cool show today. Cullen Hoback, the director of Terms and Conditions May Apply, a new documentary, sat down with Nilay Patel. And in just a little bit, I will be talking to our writer, TC Sottek, who took a trip to NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. We're going to take a look at that, and when we come back, I'll be here in the studio with TC. So let's get to it.
We're standing here on Mars with NASA's Curiosity rover. Okay, we're not really on Mars, and this is really Curiosity's sister robot, but we are at Curiosity's home base, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. And while rovers like this one have captured the imagination of humans across the planet, scientists at JPL have even more ambitious goals: to one day have more than 1 billion human beings in space.
My name is Scott Davidoff. I'm responsible for delivering the user interfaces for the systems that command the JPL spacecraft. And the challenge is that the next generation of rovers and exploration vehicles are going to be tasked with doing many, many things as opposed to just one thing.
I mean, it sounds like you're describing basically remote-controlled robotic avatars for people.
Well, sometimes that's what it's like, though the avatars aren't always like humanoid, and so the mapping isn't always as real, as natural as a hand to a hand.
So what are the biggest challenges you're facing right now trying to translate human embodiment to robot embodiment?
Probably the hardest is the delicacy of certain manipulations, and then being able to not have a full picture of the environment.
So what are you doing with Oculus?
I'm going to show you 3 demos today. The first one is seeing through the eyes of the rover. So this is the first experience. We're showing you basically stereo paired image warped onto a cylindrical display. You can see your arm, you can see the pebbles out in the distance. The more textured the environment, the more it really pops out at you. And from something like this, it's much easier to discern whether the object's in front of you or to the left or behind you, as opposed to just looking at it in a 2D window.
This is incredible detail from these photos.
Yeah, but hopefully you get a good feel of what it's like to be on Mars.
Makes me want to take a hike here.
Now this is the International Space Station, so We've taken all the US modules, put them in here.
All right, so I'm looking at this robot now.
That's Robonaut 2. It's a humanoid robot astronaut that's on the space station to help astronauts do work. That's the cupola. It's one of the windows to look outside.
Whoa.
Now you're outside. This is the entire space station. There you're looking at Earth. If you swim around enough, you can see the sun and the moon. This one's a little simpler. We're gonna start you out at Gale Crater again, but this time it's a 3D interactive environment. This is one of the ones where we think multiplayer could be really cool, is if a lot of people could be in the same environment, exploring that environment alongside this robotic avatar, which is our rover.
It's very cool. I can just feel my stomach drop when I go up and down.
So we're standing here in front of one of the athletes, one of the triathletes actually. Athlete is a 6-legged vehicle. It's actually 2 robots that combine together to make one 6-legged vehicle. Right now we have it in the single 3-legged position. It was originally designed as a multi-purpose robot to do things like cargo offloading on the moon. So if you imagine you have a lunar lander that comes down and your cargo is usually on top of the lander, you need to get that cargo off the top. The 2 triathletes can come up alongside, pick that cargo up, move it to wherever you want, and put that down. What that enables you to do is to build a larger base on the moon from smaller pieces. One of the challenges of landing on an asteroid is that asteroids have very low gravity, and if you come down and as you come for a close approach, if you use your thrusters to slow yourself down, you can kick up all kinds of dust and debris, and that will confuse your sensors, cause all sorts of trouble. The other thing is that because they're low gravity, as you come down, you have a tendency to really bounce. And these bounces can have really long periods. And asteroids are generally on these really long periodic orbits of the sun. So you don't have that much time to do your science, because if that asteroid's on a 60-year trajectory, you've got to land on that asteroid, do your science, and get off. Otherwise, you're not coming back for another 60 years.
Believe it or not, landing a robot on an asteroid isn't the most difficult problem NASA has to solve. How do you control a robot that's so far away that it might take as much as 20 minutes for a signal to reach it?
We have systems that help an operator to predict what the robot is going to do and understand the uncertainty in what it might accomplish. That uncertainty is being introduced by that delay, but still accomplish their goals in an efficient fashion.
This is a prototype that we've designed to allow people to control robotic spacecraft like the athlete more intuitively. What's sort of unique about this demo is that it's rendering a 3D model in stereo, much like if you go to a 3D movie, you can see how things pop out at you. But one of the differences is it's actually tracking where I put my head, so it creates a much more holographic feel. And I have a pen here that's also tracked, and so I can reach into the space and I can actually grab the robot and manipulate it around. I can grab its limbs, so we have joint by joint control, so I can sort of fly the robot around and I can grab a single limb and I can move a single joint. If you click on its head and then click on the ground, you can actually laser things on the ground. So no demo would be complete without being able to fire the laser.
I'm feeling good about this trajectory.
My name's Riley Avron, and I've been an intern here for now, this is my 4th summer.
And you developed this iPhone app which makes this thing run.
Yeah, exactly. So last summer, that was my project. They said to me, well, controlling this thing is kind of hard right now, and kind of confusing. It takes a while to teach people, and there are a lot of different parties who have an interest in driving the rover around. So making it, easy enough for like a media correspondent to drive is a good thing for us to do. So they said, what's a good choice? Well, an iPhone's very ubiquitous. The lab hands them out if you don't have one, so you can get one real easily. So we use the iPhone as our platform.
If you guys have any positions open for rover pilots, let me know. This is my resume.
So this is one of our robots. It's the lemur robot, and it has these microspine claws. We use that to climb rocks. It's the world's first rock climbing robot. This is a microspine wheel. Each of these little limbs here, or legs, has a hook in it. And those hooks grasp asperities in the surface, so little pits, ledges, bumps, protrusions, and allow the robot to grip that surface and climb. The lemur robot is related to the two-wheeled climber. The difference here is that this robot, lemur, is designed to climb in any orientation. So it goes upside down, it goes on vertical walls, and we're also talking about using it for asteroids, which would be zero gravity. So that's kind of how they're related. This one is, we call it a power tool for astronauts. Drilling in microgravity is a really hard problem because the normal drills that we would use on Mars are not able to be used in microgravity. There's no weight on bit. Normally when you drill, you're pushing into the surface. Mm-hmm. So on an asteroid with no gravity, you're just as likely to push yourself away as you are to push force onto the bit. And it gets even worse when you turn the drill on. You're just as likely to start spinning around the drill as the drill bit is to start spinning on the rock. This is kind of an early stage prototype of what astronauts might one day use at an asteroid to acquire samples.
Obviously, there's a lot of work to do before 1 billion humans are controlling robotic avatars on distant planets, but the work is beginning here. And someday, you might be an observer in space using technologies like those you might already have in your home, including the Kinect, the Oculus Rift, or the Leap Motion. And if NASA's vision comes true, it won't just be robots or humans exploring space independently. It will be an intimate partnership between the two.
Very cool stuff from TC and from the lovely people at JPL. And joining us now in the studio to talk about NASA and maybe TC is the delightful TC Sottek. TC,
Hey, Josh.
thanks for being here.
Thanks.
So explain to me just talk about what makes JPL unique. I mean, how is it different than other parts of NASA or, frankly, other government sort of run or controlled experiment?
It's pretty wild.
What am I trying to say? A laboratory? I don't know.
Well, it is a
experiment
laboratory.
areas.
It's actually laboratories in the name.
Yeah.
So it's the only NASA center that's federally funded but not officially part of the government. It's managed by Caltech, California University, and they get to experiment. They get to do some things a little looser.
Yeah.
Bring in technologies from companies like Microsoft and Oculus and
is the stuff that they're working on, it's private? Is it going to private industry at all? I mean, are they doing stuff that eventually trickles down to?
I mean, NASA in general is working with private space industry,
right.
So that's definitely a possibility. But JPL is working on a bunch of NASA missions, exploration science missions that includes Spirit and Opportunity rovers, Curiosity, which landed last year with a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
So they are working on federally funded NASA projects.
So my impression was watching that piece, it reminded me of when I went to Microsoft, their R&D labs, and they were just kind of, it seemed like there were projects going on where they were just like dumping some money towards a researcher and just going like, just do some weird stuff, just make something crazy. Like people would just come up with crazy ideas and they found a corner somewhere in a building and they went off and did it. Was that the impression you got when you were there?
I think some of their methods look like that, like they definitely throw stuff at the wall and have crazy ideas, but they do ultimately have to report to Congress.
You were saying that you told me before that there was a guy who got a bunch of fish hooks there at NASA.
They have different, it's like a college campus, basically.
Yeah.
They have 5,000 plus employees there and then a bunch of contractors, but they have different labs and projects going on all over the campus. And one of them was just this crazy like mad workshop where they're making climbing robots, and they found out that they could use fish hooks on the legs to climb surfaces with very small aspirations.
So there's like an Amazon Prime order for 10,000
exactly.
fish hooks.
Right.
Whenever I imagine somebody ordering something, I just think like, well, they must have gotten it on Amazon Prime.
Free shipping.
Because I literally just ordered soil from my backyard from Amazon on Amazon Prime. They came in 2 gigantic boxes. This is totally unrelated to NASA. So they're using a lot of consumer technology there. That's something that I was actually surprised by. I mean, Oculus Rift is not straight up consumer at this point, but it is basically something that anybody can own. How much, and of course they had this iPhone app, I mean, how much consumer technology is being used, and is it just because it's cheaper, or is this stuff just not available in some other form, or what is there?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. They're using these technologies that are available. First of all, it's cheaper because they don't have to build them themselves. They're available off the shelf. And the other part of the mission is to educate the public and bring the public into what NASA's doing. And they see things like Connect and Oculus, which a lot of people are going to get their hands on as an opportunity to connect with the public.
Right. So you think that part of the appeal of using something off the shelf is that it's more understandable to the public to sort of just go like, oh, I have a Kinect in my living room, and now they're using it for this, or I've seen the Oculus Rift for video games, and that Oculus Rift stuff did seem really crazy to me. I mean,
it is crazy.
I don't know what the experience is like, but watching you look at the pictures of Mars, you seem pretty blown away by it. I mean, is that a very different experience than just looking at them on a screen, just zooming in on them?
It is, and part of it is knowing what they want to do with it. When they said they want to bring 1 billion human beings into space, it's not that everybody's going to get a little blue man to control on some other planet.
Right.
It's more like you might be sitting in your living room and you put an Oculus Rift on your face, and suddenly you're looking at a live, a 20-minute delay
They didn't
feed.
mean literally get them into space.
Right.
Yeah.
They mean, you could be, in their words, standing on the shoulders of Curiosity in the future.
Do they seem? I mean, NASA's had a lot of funding issues over the last couple of decades, really. Did you get a sense that they're underfunded there, that they're struggling to do some of these projects?
I think they're not government employees, but they're close to the government, and they tend to be wary of suggesting that. But I think they obviously could do a lot more if they had more funding.
Right.
One of the interesting things, having been there, is that a lot of people have been kind of outraged that the shuttle programs are gone and that they don't see human beings going into space. But from their perspective, robot exploration really is the future of human exploration in space. It's, in their words, it's It's going to be a human-robot partnership, not one or the other.
Right. But the robot's actually going to be there, and the human's going to be sitting at home.
Well,
on Earth,
the
boring Earth.
first human explorers to Mars might be sitting in something similar to the ISS, the International Space Station above Mars, controlling robots below.
Still not on the surface of Mars themselves, though.
But it's a stepping stone.
Do they have a timeline for humans to get to Mars? I mean, what is their current timeline?
I don't actually know.
You didn't ask them?
No.
That would have been the first thing I asked.
Well, I think Obama,
I would have walked in, not even said hello to anybody, and just said, "When are humans going to be on Mars?"
Well, if you'd elected Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, right. He could have built his colony, his space colony. So what's the future of what was your takeaway here? Do you have a sense of the future of space exploration? Obviously, it's this robot-human partnership. Do you get a sense that they want to go further, faster? And are there projects that they're working on that are going to put us further out into space, or does it feels like Mars has become sort of a stopping point?
Right.
I mean,
there's so many,
rightfully so, but
there are so many challenges to solve on both ends. You know, getting the robots there is hard enough, but being able to control them in real time when you have a 20-minute signal delay is a ridiculous problem to be able to solve.
Right.
So they have to solve things like that before they can even.
Space internet. They need space internet.
Right. But you know, even the private missions that have proposed going to Mars have run up against things like, you know, radiation, which will kill people on the way there potentially. So there's a lot they have to figure out before.
I mean, the universe is really working against us when it comes to trying to get to Mars. Well, TC, the piece is awesome, and thanks so much for being here to talk about it. Really appreciate it. Up next, something very exciting. Earlier this week, Nilay Patel sat down with director Cullen Hoback. He's the director of a film called Terms and Conditions May Apply, which is very interesting, and Nilay's conversation is fascinating. We've got a clip from the movie, and after that, Nilay will be talking to Cullen. Check it out.
Doing a privacy change for 350 million users is a really, you know, it's not the type of thing that a lot of companies would do. We decided that these would be the social norms now, and we just went for it.
Google is effectively a $500 a year service because that's the value of the data that you're providing.
If they use 10% of that data, they're going to be the most valuable company ever.
Companies that you've never heard of claim to have about 1,500 points of data on the average American citizen.
Is it hard to go through it and actually find specific details about a person?
No, that's super easy. Within a couple of minutes, you can figure out what people voted for, what psychological problems they have, what parties they've been to.
They're saying it's because I agreed to the latest terms and conditions on iTunes.
No one has read the terms and conditions. No one in the world.
To the extent there have been contract decisions, they've held that these terms and conditions are valid.
And what if your phone came with these long terms and conditions said, well, if you use the phone, the government can wiretap you? That would be insane. But that's the kind of world we're living in.
Anything that's been digitized is not private. And that is terrifying.
For the government to get information from a Google or a Facebook is a lot easier than the government doing it itself and putting a wiretap on our phones.
You have to put these powers into somebody's hands.
Like social networks in recent times.
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Well, that's always what scared me, was if there's some sort of automated system that just red flags you based on the search term.
You can see that surveillance measures are being used to silence protests before they even happen.
Boom, NYPD SWAT, their bulletproof vests on, their guns drawn.
I was like, are you being serious? Are you actually holding me because of a tweet?
So we were locked away in Lewisham Police Station for 25 hours.
All these powerful institutions, they're not subject to the same invasions of privacy as the rest of us are.
So far, the population seems fine with it. If they weren't, they know who to call.
Joining me now, I've got Cullen Hoback, Director of Terms and Conditions May Apply. How you doing?
Good.
Good?
Well.
You seem surprised.
Well, I'm just. I had to sign this agreement just to come into your building right now, so I'm a little concerned about that. Actually, it wasn't too bad. It's nothing like the one you have to sign to get into Google's building. So.
Yeah. Well, we just asked for your firstborn child. Google wants 2 or 3 children at least. So let's talk about this movie. I used to be a lawyer, so the fact that you've made a movie about contracts speaks to me. Not a lot of people make a movie about contracts. Why did you decide that this movie needed to be made?
Because there's a contract associated with everything we do in the digital world now, and I think that That's been happening over time, and we just ignore them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but most contracts in our lives, if you're presented with it and you actually understand that you're legally agreeing to something, you might actually gloss over it, especially something that is taking such personal information from you.
Do you think the services are required? Because once you think the services are required to like operate in the world, then the contract I think becomes like way more important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation right now is either you get the service or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And to be a modern participant in society, in many cases, you need to be using these services.
Well, so but some of these services, and I guess my question is, if you're going to run a photo sharing service like an Instagram, which comes up in your movie, if you're going to run a photo sharing service like Facebook or Google Plus or whatever, at some point you need a license to like take people's photos and use them to run your service and copy them among your servers and like show them to other people, which is kind of the point of the services. So you need some kind of contract sitting there. How would you run an Instagram without like putting that kind of contract in place? Like, is that even possible?
First off, they don't need to be designed to be totally illegible, irreadable, completely impossible to navigate. And that's what I'm really getting at with the film. The film's not really about contracts. What the film is really about is the underlying intent of those contracts, what we're giving to the corporations, how they share our information, what's going on in the background, and what the government can do with that information.
Right. The film is coming out, it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. The film is coming out into this environment of like these leaks about PRISM and the NSA,
right, yeah.
Which is like, it's, I guess, great for your movie, bad for society that like these things are happening.
Well, the bad things have been happening for a long time. I mean, I made the film before these things were even revealed.
Right.
And I think that the film shows that the NSA has actually been going much further than even what these recent revelations have shown us.
Right. So the question I had was, at the beginning of your movie, you point out that in 2001, there was a wave of privacy legislation in Congress, and then obviously September 11th happened towards the end of 2001, and all of that legislation like died on the vine, went away, and instead we got the Patriot Act. And you draw kind of a line directly from the Patriot Act and that sort of sponsored surveillance to Facebook, Google, specifically Google, changing their privacy policy to say, well, we actually will keep data about you and share it when required. Do you think, are we still feeling those effects like that? I mean, the PRISM stuff, the NSA stuff, that feels like a direct lineage of the Patriot Act. But to draw the line from that to how Google keeps your data.
These companies point at the Patriot Act, they point at FISA, and they say, look, we have to retain this data because of these laws. And that's been going on for a long time now. But as long as we have to retain this information, let's make some money on it in the meantime. So I think that's why we haven't seen any pushback from the big tech companies that have made a fortune off of user information. Because in reality, this undermining of civil liberties that's gone on has produced billions and billions of dollars. And then you see legislators who may really care about civil liberties in the state of California, for instance, walking around and going, oh my gosh, this is really important revenue to the state. So then they don't make any changes. And I think that, asking the question, does the surveillance work? Is it stopping terrorism? We're asking the question, does the data that these tech companies are collecting make a ton of money? Those are not the right questions to be asking. The first question should be, are civil liberties being violated? If the answer to that question is yes, then something needs to change.
So how do you go about answering that question? These are all independent companies. At some point, shadow profiles on Facebook aside, I do get to choose what service I use.
Okay.
And the people seem to be overwhelmingly choosing this small handful of companies. And there isn't really a market for a more private search engine. There isn't really a market for a more privacy-focused social network. I've seen hundreds.
You think so?
I've seen lots of startups show up and be like, we're going to be the privacy-focused social network.
But do you think it's just because people didn't understand the implications up until right now?
I don't know. I
think that hopefully the film will help them understand the implications a little bit more. I mean, I do think that the next 10 years are going to show us that a lot of innovation can occur in the privacy space.
But doesn't the collection of the data for Google makes also their service better, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the important piece there?
We should have a much easier choice in that. Like, do you want to participate? Do you want to grant them that information so that you can get the benefit? As an opt-in instead of an opt-out. I really think that there are solutions to these things. Obviously, a lot of them are smart people graduating right now. I may not have all of the answers, but I do think one idea is this idea of data mobility, the idea that you could basically take your entire data set, from a Facebook to somewhere else. I think that's actually one of the things that's really limiting people from being able to leave Facebook, is they feel trapped.
Do you think that it's literally your data that's keeping you there, or is it the fact that everyone else is there?
I think it's your ability to reach out to people. I mean, in some ways it's becoming more and more of an advertising tool. The Facebooks and the Googles of the world, ultimately what we're giving them is granting access to this third party, and which is the government, and it's hard at this point to separate the two.
Right.
How do we fix that, right? I think one technique is to pressure the corporations into pressuring the government. The problem is that right now their business models rely on this data. So I think that users, though, can push back.
Is the problem that the business models rely on the data, or is the problem that the government can get it without due process and warrants? And so, I mean, at some point, don't you want these corporations to be able to give you the benefits of the big data and give you the benefits of, like, Gmail having endless cloud storage, but then prevent the government from doing something intrusive that violates their civil liberties?
I think it's finding a balance.
Yeah.
You know, and right now we've gone way too far. And I think that there are trade-offs. Convenience and security are a trade-off for privacy, right? Like Obama said recently, you can't have 100% security and 100% privacy. I think the best sort of analogy is how many people die from cars every year, right? Like in America alone, it's around 30,000. But we keep using cars because we really love cars. So these are things that are a trade-off. And in order to have a responsible government, I think that privacy is necessary.
Okay. So let's talk about the movie for a second. Comes out Friday.
Friday, July 12th, in New York, but then it opens up more widely after that. And then we also have something going on right now, which is designed to get congressmen to watch the movie. So there is a petition that you can go to and sign at trackoff.us. We're working with Demand Progress on that, and the objective is, to get as many people on Capitol Hill to watch it, because I don't think that they really understand these issues, many of them.
I mean, you know, it's funny because we do every hearing on privacy, we cover it, and it's always just a shit show. It's partially it's like a legal story, and it's partially it's like a technology story, and they clearly don't understand either aspect of it.
Right. I mean, and that's what I'm really trying to do with this film, to show how this sort of evolution of the tech and the government worked, and how it's not like they were working together necessarily to make this current state, it's that they were both benefiting from it so much. So the film really does chronicle the death of privacy and how we got to where we got. And I think that a lot of people ask this question, right? I have nothing to hide, so why does it matter, right? If it's stopping terrorism, then what's the big deal? And I think that the film answers that question. There's a lot of cases in the movie of perfectly innocent people's lives being upended because of some tweet they made or a Facebook posting.
The writer from Cold Case is a really great example.
Yeah, or you know, a writer from Cold Case who was searching for things like decapitated bodies and how to kill my wife killer, you know, all this stuff. Steak and cheese happens in the middle, and you know, he's a writer for Cold Case, and it's very easy for the things we do in a digital space to be taken out of context. And something that can be taken out of context is problematic, especially when these systems are designed to be preventing crime from happening, right?
All right, Colin, thank you so much. The film comes out July 12th. You can go to tacma.net and request a screening, which you definitely should. Also, search for it on Google and post for it on social networks to let the man know you care. Thank you so much, Colin.
Thank you.
That is our show. I want to thank Cullen Hoback for being here, Nilay and TC, NASA for just letting us walk into their labs, and you, the human being who used their eyes to watch this. We'll be back next week with more on The Verge, and until then, there is no until then.